I'm speaking with Dana Ullman. He is the leading advocate for homeopathy, and you can find more information on his website, homeopathic.com. So we were talking about going to a homeopathic doctor. There's variety of them, and some of them will give you for acute remedies, and then there's something called a constitutional remedy. Can you talk briefly about that? Because I want to make sure I have so many other questions for you today, too. So,
Well, in fact, conventional medicine doesn't know what we're talking about when we talk about constitutional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, for those of us that understand things in terms of ecology and whole systems, you know that an organism will be less resistant to infectious disease if its immune system is weak. And at the other side, we'll be more resistant to infectious disease if our immune system, when we get infected, we can then fight infection, and you don't even know you've been infected. And so constitutional care is this approach in homeopathy where it's a very detailed interview about your whole health history and ultimately your overall body-mind health at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of homeopathy in this interview as sort of like Dragnet, if you remember the TV show.
Sure, I do.
Where we just want the facts, man.
Right.
And we want to know who, what, why, where, when.
Yeah.
And so we're not just interested in whatever diagnoses you've been given, but your unique experience of that migraine headache, rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, or whatever. And so when a person says also, I'm anxious, we'd say, well, what do you mean? And when, and what types of things set you off, and what is your behavior? How does this manifest in the world? And how does this limit you in any shape, way, or form?
Right, but this constitutional analysis and evaluation, it can take a long time. I mean, this is not a quick fix, I think. It can be, I suppose, but, I've noticed for me it could take 6 months, a year before things start to shift. It's subtle. It's not like, and a lot of people just want a pill, fix me, I want to get rid of my anxiety, boom. So I think people need to be patient, right?
It is subtle,
mm-hmm.
but sometimes it's extremely dramatic.
Uh-huh.
Just recently I was seeing a patient who has actually pancreatic cancer. And for people out there, just to let you know, 95% of the people with pancreatic cancer die within the first year.
Mm-hmm.
And within 36 hours after taking this medicine, this 65-year-old man, I asked him to keep a written record of whatever symptoms he was having, and to call me if he had any questions. And he called me on a second day after beginning this medicine, and he said, well, I got to tell you, it's a little strange, but I woke up this morning with a sort of very hard erection. Is that unusual? So I said, well, you tell me, is that unusual? A lot of men wake up with an erection. And he said, well, actually, you remind me of his age. And he said, I also had my prostate removed 18 years ago.
Wow.
So it is a bit unusual.
Uh-huh.
So I said, well, obviously, you got, this medicine's giving you a little bit more life force. So.
Definitely. That's a good thing.
This isn't a side effect. This is an effect of the drug eliciting the beginning of a healing response. So,
right. And it's a bonus, right?
What does happen, and further evidence that homeopathy is not just a placebo, is that we find that when we do prescribe what are called these constitutional remedies, about between 20 and 30% of our patients experience what's called a healing crisis, where in fact they don't get better. Initially, in fact, they get worse in some shape, way, or form. Mm-hmm. But it's in a way that's somewhat predictable. It's what we call an externalization of the disease process. So a woman that may be having fibroids may have a early and clotted and profuse menstruation. Mm-hmm. Or a person with respiratory problems may develop a skin rash. Or people will re-experience old symptoms that they have not had for years or even decades. And then they say, now that I think about it, ever since I had this symptom, this was the first symptom I had when I began getting ill.
Oh.
So, when skeptics out there tell me that they're skeptical of homeopathy and it doesn't make any sense, I mean, it just tells me so easily, one, they haven't done any homework. They have not read the body of clinical research. They have not read the body of laboratory research. They haven't even talked to colleagues of their own that have actually tried homeopathy.
Right, because doctors do say that what you said, it's nonsense. Like, I've heard Dr. Dean Adele on the radio talk about how it's nonsense, and that makes me so mad,
They're basically armchair philosophers. And in fact, they really do medicine and science a disservice. And what's worse is it's this combination of arrogance and ignorance.
That's a bad combination.
I mean, it's a really bad combination if you think of wanting to be a scientist.
Right.
I mean, the best scientists are humble, or if they're going to remark about something, they're going to do their homework and not just look at a couple studies, but understand and look at the body of evidence. Because homeopathy has been around for 200 years, and because one of the books I wrote, which you made note of, the Homeopathic Revolution, Why Famous People and Cultural Heroes Chose Homeopathy, I wrote that book because I wanted people to know the significant, large, and wide shoulders that those of us involved with homeopathy stand on.
Right.
So
you say that also it's very popular in Europe, right?
Yeah. 50 to 60% of the German public, 30 to 40% of the French public.
Right.
And also, ultimately, it's the more educated people. And so these are the cultural elites of these countries. And it's no surprise that the British royal family has been involved with homeopathy, but all of the European royals, and even the Russian czars, and for that matter, even 7 different popes.
Wow.
And, gurus and corporate leaders and literary greats. So, when people in a offhanded and very sloppy way say, "Oh, the homeopathy doesn't make sense," well, love doesn't make sense. I mean, is there evidence that love exists?
Right, there you go.
There's so many things that we don't adequately understand. So if you're going to say, well, I don't understand it, that's one thing. But when you actually, try and attack it as these, I don't call them skeptics, by the way. I call them deniers.
Okay.
And I call them medical fundamentalists.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to just ask you, this is an issue that's on people's minds lately with radioactivity, and can homeopathy help protect us against that?
Well, that's a longer question, but yes. In fact, believe it or not, the very first person to ever use radiation as a treatment modality for people with cancer was a homeopathic medical student who was testing it and found that it was causing tumors, and he ended up losing an arm as a result of that. And yet, despite all the early exposure he got to radiation, he lived to 85 years old. And this was in part because he was treated homeopathically. And some of the medicines that we use in homeopathy for people who are exposed to radiation are some radioactive substances in homeopathic dose that are recognized by the FDA as safe, at least in the doses that we give. And some of those substances include homeopathic doses of X-ray, homeopathic doses of radium bromide, homeopathic doses of even cadmium we use for people who are who've undergone radiation from cancer treatment. So, we have a whole variety of medicines, and one of the other ones that they've even done some studies on is homeopathic doses of ginseng, which are very interesting because they found that even crude doses of ginseng have an effect upon repairing DNA. And the same seems to be true with homeopathic doses.
Well, that's fascinating. So people should not just run out and get all this on their own. The best thing to do is to find a good homeopathic doctor like yourself or... Yes. Okay.
I mean, some of this stuff is easy, and some of this stuff is tricky.
Right. And is there a resource for people to find a doctor in their area?
Well, our company, Homeopathic Educational Services, which is homeopathic.com, we do provide a free list to people when when, and this is important, when they buy a book from us.
Okay.
Or one of the services I provide is I provide a personalized referral based on their particular needs and situation, though I need 10 minutes of the person's time, and I do charge a $40 fee for that.
Very reasonable.
Right.
Well,
and I do see patients selectively, and whenever anyone has a serious condition, I do require that they also concurrently be under medical care.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time, and I really appreciate you being on the show today. And again, if people want to get more information, it's
Go to homeopathic.com or see my blog at the Huffington Post. You can just go search for my name, Dana Ullman, Ullman, and see the 15 or so articles that I've written. I'm real proud of that body of work that I presented there.
Fabulous. It's wonderful to talk to you today. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for listening. For podcasts and more information on my show, visit yoursupernaturallife.com. You can also download the show on iTunes. My book, Supernatural Home, you can be found on Amazon or on my website, supernaturalmom.com. And if you type in supernaturalmom.com/free gift, you can download a free 20-question quiz from my book to help you determine where, when, and how you are unwittingly being exposed to dangerous chemicals from everyday products in your home. Plus, you'll get my 10 easy ways to have a supernatural home. See you here next week. This is Beth Greer.